talking about George Washington, soldiers, weapons, and war uniforms of the Revolutionary War. First, let's start off with George Washington. George Washington was born on February 22nd, 1732, in Westmoreland County, Virginia. He grew up with a mom, Mary Washington, a dad, Augustine Washington, and a brother, Lawrence Washington. His father died when George was 11. After that, his older brother Lawrence took care of him. Lawrence taught George subjects like math and reading. When George became 16, he became a surveyor, a man who measured new land. Later in his life, he joined the Virginia militia. During this time, he fought in the French and Indian War, where he avoided death when his horse was shot from under him. After the French and Indian War, he married a widow, Martha, and took over his brother's estate since Lawrence had died, and then he became a landowner. Soon, though, he and other landowners grew angry at British rule. May of 1775, Washington joined the Continental Army and became the 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 biggest leader in it. When George was the general in the Continental Army, he almost never surrendered. In 1776, December 25th, Washington and his soldiers crossed the Delaware River and surprised the Hessen forces, which were German soldiers hired by the British. Later, they crossed the river again to go back to camp. When they did, they brought 1,000 captured soldiers across. They crossed a third time to attack British reinforcements. The British surrendered under General Cornwallis, which made New Jersey almost British free. Later in the war, Washington found the British in Yorktown. The French Navy soon came and defeated the British Navy and surrounded Yorktown. Washington's forces made Cornwallis surrender again, and after 2 years, the war ended after the signing of the Treaty of Paris. Now the new country needed a leader. All the state representatives decided Washington should lead the country. After two terms, 4 years. Washington stepped down. Since then, only one person, Theodore Roosevelt, served more than 2 terms. This person probably said this quote because he was no longer part of the British colonies, but he was truly now an American, and he and other people were Americans too, and that they were all united. Soldiers, because many soldiers helped in the Revolutionary War, and they were on both sides. So the colonists in the French and Indian War made a motion. The militia were citizens who contained farmers, landowners, and etc. Some were Minutemen, soldiers who were supposed to be ready at a minute's notice. Most militia were only trained annually, and militias usually just wore regular clothing. Other colonists joined the Continental Army. The colonist army they formed after the Boston Massacre. The Continental Army was sort of like the militia, except bigger, and you were usually paid to be in it. You were usually in it for 6 months to 3 years. You were paid either land or money, and if it was money, it was either usually $6 to $20. Like militia, the people were wide variety. Slaves were even in the war. in the army. The army was built to fight the British, all in all. All the rebelling colonists called themselves patriots, but many colonists remained loyal to. Now I will talk about the British and who fought on their side. The British were a fierce but faulty force, and because Lord Cornwallis had to surrender many times to the Continental Army and the militia. British soldiers were called redcoats because of their red coats. They also had colonists called loyalists who eventually fled to Canada, other controlled British territory, and Britain after the war. They also had Native Americans such as the Iroquois Confederates and hired British soldiers called Hessian soldiers, named after where they came from. I will talk about the Revolutionary War, because a lot of the battles in the Revolutionary War couldn't be fought without weapons. The most popular, though, is probably the musket. It was a rifle/shotgun that had a long blade on the end of it, which was called a bayonet. It shot a large ball called a musket ball, but it didn't have very good aim, even though it was very popularly used. They also used handguns, which didn't have very good aim either. They also used long rifles too. They were the starters of the American rifles in both hunting and in the military. They usually had long barrels and they were also used for hunting. Another popular weapon is the cannon. The cannon is a thick barrel on wheels pretty much, filled with gunpowder that shoots an explosive projectile. The saber was also used. The saber was a long backsword that was carried by high-ranked soldiers. Other weapons were swords, knives, throwing axes, and polearms, which were spear-like weapons. I hope you enjoyed my presentation. Thank you.